This is your host, Maheen, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. We're here to bring you another episode filled with inspiration, innovation, and invaluable insights from the heart of Canada's entrepreneurial spirit. Today, we turn our attention to the dynamic intersection of global talent trends, the critical role of trust and equity in the workplace, and the transformative power of digitization. It's my pleasure to introduce Christie Rall, a distinguished leader known for her strategic approach to talent management, engagement, and her expertise in driving organizational growth. Christie's experience spans across a variety of sectors, including entertainment, media, telecommunications, retail, healthcare, and more, making her a versatile and visionary force in the industry. Her commitment to fostering innovative talent strategies, organizational development, and leadership excellence has marked her as a pivotal figure in shaping the future of work. As we delve into today's pressing topics with Christie, we're set to explore the depths of global talent trends, AI in workplace, and the journey towards digital transformation. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Christie. Good afternoon, Christie, and a warm welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. How are you today?
Oh, good. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. That was a lovely introduction.
It was one of the most impressive bios I've read in a long time. So we're quite eager, Christie, to hear your perspectives and learn from your experiences. Now, this notice for the audience before we begin to discuss more about the global talent trends study. Now, as we prepare to explore the insights with Christie Rall that she will share with us today, I really want to invite everyone, our valued listeners, to really reflect on the transformative power of talent strategies in today's rapidly evolving workplace, and keep questions like, how does your organization approach innovation, and in what ways can you foster a culture that not only embraces change but thrives on it in mind, right? And let's keep our minds open to the possibilities that Christie's experiences and perspectives may have for us. Now, Christie, understanding the pulse of the global workforce is quite essential for shaping effective talent strategies. Could you give us an overview of what the global talent trend study entails and its significance?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a global study that we do at Mercer every 2 years. And it's really focused on taking the pulse of the workplace, how workplaces are evolving, and what they need to address to really thrive. I'll just set the stage kind of with the size and the scope of the survey. So globally, we survey over 1,200 C-suite executives, investors, HR leaders, and employees around their concerns and trends in the workforce. And then again, we can look at kind of where there are divergent and convergent perspectives kind of across that population.
Mm-hmm. And the insights from the study are quite invaluable for businesses aiming to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving market. What key findings emerged from the study, especially concerning Canadian businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you have to keep me honest here because I could talk about these 4 trends all day long. Listen, this report really highlights some staggering shifts at work. And in the workplace. So if coming out of COVID, our last report was all about the relatable organization, how organizations kind of meet employees where they're at in this moment of really unprecedented kind of social change. Now it's all about the agile organization. And how do we drive human machine teaming in this new world of AI? How do we create workforces augmented by AI in which people thrive? And how do we unlock that productivity equation, get the most out of the tools, and again, kind of look at that human and digital interaction at work? So more specifically, there's 4 key trends: productivity, trust, resilience, and digital. The productivity trend is probably it's one of my most favorites. Actually, I think all 4 are really important, but I think it's so interesting because in unlocking productivity, this year, what we see is that AI is the challenge and AI is the answer. So it's all about translating the hype of Gen AI into real organizational productivity gains. And how do we do that? We do that with kind of agile skill-based talent models, rethinking how work gets done and rethinking how talent flows into work versus kind of just in static jobs. So that's the driving human-centric productivity. The second trend is around trust and anchoring in trust and equity. And this is really about, fostering that climate of fair pay, equity, and inclusion. As the world gets more and more uncertain, we're shifting from that relatable organization to a trust-based one where it's all about action and a sense of transparency and fair people practices. The third trend that we saw is around boosting the corporate immune system. And this is about building resilient cultures with teams that are risk aware and healthy at their core. We live in a world of heightened risk. So geopolitical, climate risks, economic risks, and we have this new one around misinformation and disinformation. And we need to foster a new sense of readiness to address these risks. And then operationally in organizations, look at how we're navigating data hygiene, controls, large language models, so that organizations and employees in those organizations can thrive. And health and benefits and how we think about health and benefits is really important there, particularly in Canada. And then
Right.
the last piece of the puzzle is around cultivating a digital first culture. So this is really back to AI. How do we design an adaptive and digitally fluent organization that can, again, unlock kind of the value of that human and teaming connection?
Right. Now let's kind of delve into the views of AI as we spoke about
Mhm.
it. From the Canadian C-suite executives. Now, the AI is at the forefront of technological advancements impacting the workplace. Christy, how do Canadian C-suite executives currently view AI, and what potentials do they see?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think, where we saw in the data, we saw that in Canada, generally, our kind of regional results are similar to the global results. But I will say that around how C-suite executives are thinking about AI, there is a particular differentiator here. So the digital acceleration is the number one priority for Canadian executives. Also, we see that about 36% of Canadian executives predict that AI will deliver gains of more than 30%. That's a little less than globally. So it's interesting, right? Digital acceleration is the number one priority for Canadian execs, but we think that we might not understand or know quite how to harness what the gains that's going to come out of AI. And I think that's a really important piece that we need to look at and solve across Canadian organizations. And we can kind of delve into that in terms of what does that look like, right? And what are some of the kind of other key differentiators? What else? I think what we see with AI, we can talk about it in terms of that digital first culture, that in Canada, we think about transforming work and work cultures and ways of working alongside technology more than the global results showed, but we're not quite as concerned as the impact of AI on the workforce. So that's 51% of Canadian executives are concerned about the impact of AI on the workforce compared to 60%
Mhm.
globally. And where we really are in outliers, we're not looking at much at skills-based talent processes. So it's interesting when we think about like how do we unlock those productivity gains, and where we see that Canadian executives are maybe slightly behind the global trend there, actually think the answer is those skills-based talent processes, and looking at how we look at jobs beyond, from the lens of skills versus, as I said, those static-based jobs, and how you're able to build that agile talent infrastructure to meet kind of new ways of working, new demands on work, but also flow talent to where the high demand areas are based on skills. And so I think that's a really interesting differentiator because it's so important in unlocking those productivity pieces of AI. And then the last thing is we lag slightly behind in the global findings in terms of creating that digital first culture that, again, is so important to unlocking the power of AI, how employees think about teaming with tools to get work done better and faster, and making sure that we're embedding that ability to change and grow with the tools in how we think about transformation.
No, really, the perspectives of leaders on AI really highlight the balancing act between the innovation and the human-centric strategies. And on that note, I mean, hearing about the impact of AI from Christie's perspectives really sheds light on the myriad ways technology can enhance our professional lives. And for everyone listening, consider how AI can be leveraged within your own businesses to not only streamline operations but also to unlock the untapped potential within your own teams. And let's challenge ourselves really to think beyond the conventional boundaries and envision a workplace where technology and human creativity can coexist to drive unprecedented growth. Um, Let's kind of learn more about the sustainable future of work. Chrissy, creating a sustainable path to the future of work is a multifaceted challenge. What are the main challenges businesses face in navigating towards a sustainable future of work?
Yeah, so two things here. And one of them I might pick up from what you had just said about that untapped potential. So when I think about thinking about skills-based models, so skills-based career pathways, looking at jobs kind of beyond role and into like how can you meet the moment by bringing those untapped skills to the fore. One of the ways that we saw in the data here around sustainability is really about building and developing those skills in-house. So we're seeing quite a large shift from looking at that kind of churn and burn model, or looking for skills that you don't currently have in your organization in kind of the larger talent ecosystem. And what we're seeing is, and I think it's true, right, that the technology and the tools are evolving so quickly that there's a lot of net new skills out there that you can't just source in the market, that you have to think about what is the untapped potential of your teams? Where can you invest in skilling and reskilling and upskilling? And again, as we start to use AI more and we start to see those productivity gains, how do you flow that time gained back into the system around skilling and upskilling so that you make sure that you really are tapping the potential of all of your employees? Because when we think about skills, we're actually thinking about net new skills for now and in 5 years that we don't even know exist yet, right? So I think that's a really interesting piece that you said there around untapped potential and thinking about skills now and in the future and how we grow them. The other piece of the puzzle around risk and resilience, I think, is really interesting. And again, I think this is where Canada was very much an outlier, is in terms of health and wellness. So what do we know? We know that what keeps employees up at night? It's burnout and financial well-being. We know that 6 hours a month are lost to money worries kind of across the workforce. And in Canada, what we saw in the data is that exhaustion ranks number one versus number two globally, and financial strain marks number two versus number one globally. So there's an interesting flip there, with exhaustion at the top of the list, that, in terms of where the workforce say that they're at risk of burnout. And so I think that's actually a really key piece of the puzzle when we talk about resilience, right? The more benefits you apply to employees, the more less likely they are to leave. We know that around 40% of employees would take a pay cut for a benefits increase, and that's critical in creating resilience. So, I challenge your listeners to think about how they think about total rewards and what that means, and how they augment their total rewards packages and services to address this number one kind of reason for burnout, which is exhaustion. I would like to call out, though, because I know I talked a little bit about where Canada's lagging in terms of thinking about digital ways of working and skills-based talent processes, where we're leading. And actually, we're leading in terms of what HR thinks about, total rewards. So we invest more in benefits to improve physical and mental health, 64% in Canada compared to a global average of 50%. That's quite significant. And that we're also more likely to have AI-powered mental health resources. Again, 40% of respondents in Canada versus 33% globally. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity when we think about unlocking potential and working with AI, I say we, I also mean you for your listeners, kind of continue that trend and use kind of AI to unlock and solve for some of those pieces around burnout.
Right. So navigating these challenges really requires a strategic and thoughtful approach to integrate technology with human potential. Now, the pillars of trust and equity, which are quite crucial in the digital transformation journey. Chrissy, in this realm of digitization, what should organizations be mindful of regarding trust and equity?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, again, one of my favorite topics. So trust has an outsized impact on brand. But this year, it also has an outsized impact on people's intent to stay and their engagement. And what we're really talking about when we talk about trust is we're talking about the integrity of organizational practices. Coming out of the pandemic, which, to be fair, was really high peak of trust in terms of how employees and organizations kind of work together. We're seeing kind of trust drop on 15 to 10% on every dimension. I think these are early warning signals of how important it is to kind of invest in trust and equity in your people practices and build that transparency strategy that, again, we know is so core to building trust. A couple ways I think about this, back to this idea of living in this world of just outstanding change and uncertainty. And people are really looking to their employers to drive and be that anchor. And if you can't provide certainty, you can at least provide clarity, right? And that's what kind of anchors stability. So trust and fairness, this is becoming the currency of relationships and organizations. Trust in the workforce, trust in your customers, trust in kind of anchoring to a safe and future. What do I think in Canada is really, really, really important? Like, what's a trust builder? Listen, I think pay transparency is top of mind and is really key when you think about building those trust-based relationships. What do we know keeps people up at night? Financial concerns. And as pay transparency is legislated across the country, I think Canadian employers of all scales and sizes should be thinking about what's their transparency strategy. Do you have the foundations right to be able to show and be transparent in your pay practices to kind of build that trust? One of the things that we know is driving pay transparency is the fact that we live in a world in which the data is out there. So the stats are somewhere around like 68% of employees know what their pay ranges are, even though only 38% of organizations are currently communicating them, right? The data is out there. That goes exponentially higher when I talk about Gen Z. So what builds trust? Using great data, listening to employees, driving and showing and showcasing fair processes, right, that drive equity. So I think these are the anchors in building trust. And then, of course, once you've got the basics right, you've looked at kind of your job architecture, your pay practices, your total rewards packages, and you're looking at how you've built trust, fairness, and equity into those systems. And you expand to your larger talent practices, performance management, right? How do you make sure that we're getting bias out of the system and that those practices are driving sustainable fairness, right, over the long term of someone's career? And I think, again, that's so critical right now when we talk about trust and equity.
Right. Now, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's quite clear that upholding trust and equity in the digital age is quite foundational for building resilient and inclusive workplaces. Now, another key area which is trending now is the integration of AI into the workforce, which is becoming quite a pivotal move for Canadian businesses. Christy, what considerations should Canadian businesses have when implementing AI into their workforce strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another place where I think it's so important that HR can really lead in this space, because when we think about AI, it touches every component piece of an organization, all processes, policies, BUs. And I think when you're talking about this kind of organizational wide implementation, we have to elevate from, we like to say, being digital to doing digital to being digital, right? So it's not just about how we use the technology. I mean, getting the intersection of human and technology at work is an old story, right? We've been dealing with it for decades and decades and decades. And the story has always been, we'll put people at the core. Think about the mindsets and the behaviors that are needed to really drive a culture change. And I would say that's true now. It's just exponential. It's just so much more critical because the technology is going to be so much more integrated into how we engage, how we communicate, how we collaborate. And so really thinking about how the human and the tech come together to add value. How are you harnessing technology to help people work smarter, delivering services that feel personalized and meaningful and that can be delivered on scale? So it's not about processing transactions. It's not about kind of just using technology. It's really about actually shaping those interactions and listening to your employees to make sure that the tools are fit for purpose and growing with them. I mean, we talk a lot about being a digitally fluent organization and thinking long-term beyond a specific tool. And I think that's really, really, really critical here. How do you build the skills and the mindsets to be more digitally fluent? And again, with AI, I think that's the starting place. And really moving away from transitioning from using one solution to using another solution to actually being solution agnostic, that your employee base should have those kind of core digital skills skills and ways of thinking in terms of how they think about data, how they think about collaboration, how they think about streamlining work, right? To really, again, kind of unlock the value of what AI can bring to the table.
Right. Now, the thoughtful integration of AI can really revolutionize workforce strategies, driving growth and innovation. Now, before we conclude, Christy, could you share one final piece of advice for businesses navigating the complexities of today's global talent landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I might give you two
Go
because
ahead.
one of the things I just wanted to call out from the last question is around a resilient organization is 2 times more likely to drive a digital first culture. So I think when we think about implementing AI, when we think about these 4 trends, I think the most important piece is to think about what that culture change means. How do you drive kind of a risk mindful culture, right? How do you drive a digital first culture? How do you think about what those core behaviors and protocols are that you want to drive across your organization? Because that's what's actually going to augment your ways of working and your employee experience. If I had one point of advice for everybody to take away is, listen, these are big ideas. I have so many more stats in my back pocket. There's so much to kind of noodle on and process here that it can feel overwhelming. And I think what's really important is to realize you don't have to bite off the whole piece of the puzzle. We are talking about transformation with a capital T, but we're also talking about transformation with a small t. So it's in like, what do you need to do first, right? What do you need to do first in terms of driving a transparent organization? Well, look at your pay practices and solve for that and start to think about what your transparency strategy is and what that means for what leaders need to do and how they have to act. When you think about cultivating a digital first culture, what are those core behaviors that you want to drive across the business and how do you anchor that in ways of working? When we think about productivity, you don't have to start by redesigning your work process. You can actually start by looking at, well, what are the skills we need for the future and how do we start to build them in-house? I think there are big things you can do and there are small things you can do, and they're equally as important as we start to kind of meet the pace of change that's happening right now.
Thank you so much, Christy, for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge on global talent trends, AI, and the importance of trust and equity in the workplace. Your insights offer a roadmap for businesses looking to adapt, innovate, and thrive in the digital era. So, thank you so much for your time. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember that embracing change and leveraging technology with a human touch are key to navigating the future of work successfully. We're grateful to our partners, exclusive banking partner RBC, shipping partner UPS, exclusive accounting partner Xero, and email partner Constant Contact. Be sure to subscribe to the Canadian SME Small Business Magazine by visiting our website, canadiansme.ca, for more inspiring stories and strategic insights.